Is the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 worth buying in 2021? Well, in this video, we're gonna find out. Hey everybody, this is Andre here covering for Kevin on the Kevin Breeze channel, and in this video, we're gonna be taking a look at the Samsung Galaxy Note 8. Now, as I'm sure you know, this phone has been around for a little while. Now, you might be able to get this phone these days for a lot less than it originally retailed for, but what kind of value are we getting out of this? Well, we're about to find out. So this phone has a 6.3-inch Super AMOLED display in a resolution of 1440p, and it has a PPI of 521 with an aspect ratio of 18.5 by 9. The phone also has an 83.2% screen-to-body ratio, which is really nice. It doesn't have very big bezels, which leaves a lot of room for the screen. Now, this phone has an 8-megapixel front-facing camera. By today's standards, 8 megapixels might be a little low for a flagship phone, but at the same time, compared to entry-level smartphones of this price range, 8 megapixels is pretty high for a front-facing camera. This phone comes with 64 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD expansion, which is really good. I typically think 64 gigabytes is a good starting point for storage for me at least. Now, if you're using more or less data, that might be different, but 64 gigabytes is really good to have, especially considering the mid $200 range phones typically start out around 32 gigabytes, but this one can definitely do a lot more than that. To give you a better idea of what 64 gigabytes of storage looks like, this phone currently has all the stuff people typically use on a daily basis on the phone, and it's taking up 17.3 gigabytes, and right now the phone has 46.7 gigabytes available. That is definitely a decent amount of space. If you're using a phone for moderate content consumption and even content creation, you're definitely going to have enough space, especially considering you can expand it with an SD card. Now, this phone also has wireless charging, which is really nice. A great majority of entry-level smartphones in this price range don't have wireless charging, so it's really nice to have. There's also a fingerprint scanner on the back. Now, I personally am not a fan at all of where they place this. Not only is it outside the natural range of where you'd be holding a phone, I don't know about you guys, but I don't hold a phone up here. I typically have my finger resting around here. But this fingerprint scanner also puts the camera at risk. If you're putting your finger in this area so close to the camera to unlock the phone, it would be really easy to accidentally touch the camera lens, which is not the best for the camera, especially if you're about to take a picture, then you're gonna have to spend extra time wiping it off after you get a fingerprint on it. It's just not very convenient, especially considering most phones these days have a fingerprint scanner right here or even on the screen instead. It would have been really nice if it was put in a more convenient location. But let's give it a try now. As you can see, it's very fast. Let's try it one more time. As you can see, although the placement of the scanner itself is pretty inconvenient, at least it's fast. Now, this phone not only has face unlock, which is really nice, but it also has an iris scanner. Now, this is a little weird. I've never used an iris scanner before personally, but it's nice to have a variety of different options to choose from to unlock your phone. Now, taking a look at the camera setup, this phone has a 12 megapixel rear camera and a 12 megapixel depth sensing camera. Now, unfortunately, there's no ultra-wide camera. A lot of phones these days, even the entry-level smartphones around this price range, do have ultra-wide cameras. It's definitely becoming more and more of a thing. When this phone was released, it was definitely not as common, so it makes sense that it doesn't have one, but if that's a feature you're looking for, then you might want to look at a different device. That being said, the camera quality itself is still very good, especially compared to a lot of the entry-level smartphones around this price range. There's also the portrait mode as well on this section right here. Yeah, that is one thing. Even though it might not have an ultra-wide camera, it definitely has a really good quality portrait mode. And this is the front-facing camera, of course. Now, compared to a lot of flagship phones that are around today, the front-facing camera might not be quite that impressive, but compared to the entry-level smartphones around this price range, it is definitely competitive. Now, the front-facing camera also does have portrait mode under selective focus. Just doing a quick test of the video quality of the device. We are shooting in 4K currently. Also keep in mind the audio quality. As you can see, the video quality of this device is very good, as well as the audio quality. This device is able to shoot video in 4K, which is definitely something that entry-level smartphones around this price range are not going to be able to do very well. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that although it can shoot in 4K, the resolution of the screen is only 1440p, which is really just a little bit better than 1080p. So it's not going to be able to view the videos in 4K, but it can still shoot in 4K and the display still looks very good. Now, internally, we're getting 6 GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 835 processor. Now, according to the Geekbench 5 benchmark test, this phone has a single core score, as you can see, of 363 and a multi-core score of 1582. Again, compared to a lot of the flagship smartphones that are being released today, that's not really that high, but definitely compared to the smartphones that you're going to find in the $100, $200, even $300 range, this is definitely competitive, if not better than most of them. If you're only going to be using this device for basic activities like making calls, sending text messages, even some light internet and social media browsing, then this phone might be more than you need. But if you're going to be doing some more heavy content consumption and even some content creation like video and photo editing, and maybe some gaming as well, then this phone would be a great value for you because it's not a whole lot more than a lot of those entry-level smartphones, but it's definitely going to give you a significant amount of extra processing power. Now, this phone has a 3300 milliamp hour battery, which is not the biggest battery out there, especially for a flagship phone that's this powerful, but it's definitely going to give you a good amount of battery life. Another thing to keep in mind when buying an older flagship phone is that even if you get it renewed and fully refurbished, the battery is still not going to be a brand new battery. It's going to be used a little bit, so you might not get quite as much battery life as you would from a brand new phone. Another thing to point out about this device specifically is that this phone runs on Android 9 Pie and it's not going to be able to be updated either. So if getting the latest version of Android is important to you, then you might want to look at another device. Now that we've gone over the various specs of the phone, let's take a look at the hardware. So up top, we got the slot for the micro SD card and the SIM card, as well as the microphone. And then we got the earpiece right here and the front-facing camera right here. And again, this camera is 8 megapixels. At the bottom, there's a 3.5mm headphone jack, a USB-C charging port, a microphone, and then the speaker. And then of course right here, we got our stylus. And I think this is a really cool thing to have. A lot of people don't use it, but I personally really like it. On the left side of the phone, we have the volume up button, the volume down button, and a Bixby button. Now, I've personally never been a fan of these buttons, whether it's Bixby or Google Assistant or whatever it might be. I personally don't think it's necessary to have this button. There's so many other ways to access it that a button like this, especially for the people who don't even use the assistant, whatever version of it might be at all, it's a little inconvenient and unnecessary to even have the button there. Because at that point, if you accidentally press it and you never use it to begin with, then it's just going to interrupt whatever you're doing, which is super inconvenient. So I personally am not a fan of this button at all. But if you use it and you find it convenient, then that's a great plus. Now the power button for the phone is on the right side. And then taking a look at the back, we have our camera set up and then there's a Samsung logo right here. And of course, let's not forget our rather inconveniently placed fingerprint scanner. Again, I'm definitely not a fan of where this fingerprint scanner is. It's so easy to accidentally put your finger on the camera lens instead, which is super annoying when you're trying to take a picture. And naturally, most people hold their phone like this, and you have to move your finger up a little bit to even press it. In general, I feel like it's a lot more convenient to have a fingerprint scanner around this area right here. But the bright side of this is the fingerprint scanner is very fast, and the phone does have plenty of different options to unlock it. So in the end, it's not really that big a deal. And of course, we got our Samsung logo right here, as well as Galaxy Note 8 right here. Now, just by holding it, you can definitely tell that this is a flagship phone. It feels very high quality and has the glass material that you would expect from a phone of this caliber. The back has a glossy finish, and surprisingly, fingerprints don't really show up that much. Usually phones made of a more glossy material will have more obnoxious fingerprints on them, but this one has quite a few fingerprints, but you can't really tell that much. Now, in conclusion, is this phone worth buying in 2021? I would say it really depends. If you're only using a phone for basic activities like making calls, sending text messages, and doing light internet browsing, and maybe taking a few pictures here and there, then I would say no, because this phone has a lot of features that if you're just doing basic activities, you're really not going to need. If you're only taking a few pictures here and there, you really don't need the high quality camera that this phone has. And if you're not going to be doing a whole lot of content consumption, then you're really not going to notice the difference in processing power. But if you're doing more heavy content consumption and even content creation where you're doing photo and video editing and maybe even some gaming, then this processing power is definitely going to help a lot. And I would say at that point, it would be worth it, because if you're looking for a higher performance device, because this phone really doesn't cost a whole lot more than an entry-level smartphone at this point, and it's going to give you a lot higher performance too. I would caution you though, when you're buying a used flagship phone, you should definitely buy from a reputable source, whether that's Amazon Renewed or some other refurbished service, because the last thing you want is to buy a broken phone off of Craigslist and find out that it really doesn't work. But assuming that you get a good deal and the device does function properly, then I would say if you're going to be doing more higher performance activities like content creation and higher content consumption and gaming, then this phone is definitely still worth buying in 2021. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.